Everyone knows the story of the Titanic, but most of us learned about it thanks to the 1997 cult film. That's how I first discovered it too, and the movie was mesmerizing. The fact that a ship called Unsinkable sank on its very first voyage, taking 1,523 lives with it, was astonishing to me. Setting aside all its absurd sides, the DiCaprio-Winslet film truly is magnificent, and I have nothing bad to say about it. But when I think about it now, there's something that often goes unnoticed. Titanic is not really a love story between Jack and Rose. Of course, on a ship carrying thousands of people from different socio-economic levels, you can find stories of love, passion, desire, anger, every human emotion. But the Titanic's story is not one of romance. It is a story of managerial errors, a natural disaster, and an engineering failure. When we scientifically question how such a magnificent engineering marvel of its time could sink so easily, the data collected over the past 110 years reveals a fascinating scientific tale. In 1912, Titanic was not only the largest passenger ship ever built up to that time, it was also the largest ship ever constructed in any category. With its 269-meter length, 46,328 gross tons, and a passenger capacity of 3,547, it was the biggest vessel of its age. Its lesser-known twin, the Olympic, had been built before it, and unlike Titanic, it never sank. In fact, the Olympic gave its name to the whole class of liners, which also included the Britannic. The Britannic sank in 1916 during World War I, serving as a hospital ship when it struck a German mine near the Greek island of Kea and went down in just 55 minutes. Despite being the largest ship sunk during the entire war, thanks to warmer Aegean waters, more lifeboats, and faster rescue efforts, 1,036 of its 1,066 passengers survived. Today, the wreck still rests in those beautiful Aegean waters. Thus, among the three Olympic-class liners, only the Olympic avoided a tragic fate. Though perhaps because it didn't share that ill fortune, it never became as famous. But today, our subject is not the Britannic or the Olympic. It is Titanic, and Titanic's death was sealed from the day it was born. The iceberg that dealt the fatal blow was born almost simultaneously with the ship itself, 3,200 kilometers away from where Titanic was built, near Belfast, Ireland. It broke off from Greenland's glaciers and was composed of snow that had fallen over the last 100,000 years. A 75-million-ton giant, but still ordinary for an iceberg. Every year, about 40,000 such icebergs form, but most never drift far enough south to threaten shipping lanes. They usually get trapped in the shallower waters around Greenland and Canada. Only rarely do they survive the currents that drag them west and then south into the Atlantic. But in the very year Titanic made its maiden voyage, an extraordinary exception occurred. Yet the real tragedy lies in three critical design and construction mistakes made before Titanic ever set sail. The first mistake occurred 2 years before construction began, during a meeting between chief designer Alexander Carlisle and shipowner Bruce Ismay. Ismay insisted that the ship's grand staircase, the same one made famous in the movie with Kate Winslet's Descent, be as luxurious as possible. This decision compromised structural integrity. The watertight bulkheads that divided the ship into compartments were built lower than they should have been. To prevent flooding from spreading, such walls should rise well above the waterline. But on Titanic, they were only 3 meters above. This ensured that the ship would flood much faster. The second mistake was in the lifeboat design. Titanic could have carried 64 lifeboats, each capable of holding about 65 to 70 people, which would have been enough for more than 4,500 people, well above its 3,547 passenger capacity. But Ismay, finding the lifeboats ugly and overcrowding the deck, ordered the number cut to just 16, plus 4 collapsible boats. This reduced capacity to only 1,178, barely 53% of the 2,223 people actually on board when the ship sailed. The third mistake occurred during construction. Steel was a relatively new material in 1912, stronger than iron but harder to work with. Shipbuilders used rivets to hold steel plates together. In many areas, they used strong steel rivets, but at the ship's bow, where plates curved and space was too tight for steel rivet machinery, they used weaker iron rivets. These softer rivets could fail under as little as 5 millimeters of stress. When Titanic struck the iceberg, these rivets popped apart like the teeth of a zipper, opening the hull. The time required only a fixed number, 1,060 seats, not a ratio based on passenger capacity. Titanic technically exceeded that requirement, so it was cleared to sail. Other misfortunes followed. The ship's captain, Edward Smith, known as the Millionaire's Captain, because wealthy figures like Vanderbilt, Guggenheim, and J.P. Morgan preferred to sail under him, was on his final voyage before retirement. Titanic's departure was delayed by a month due to repairs on its twin Olympic after a collision. During crew changes, Third Officer David Blair was reassigned, and in his haste, he accidentally took with him the key to the lookout's locker, where the binoculars were stored. As a result, Titanic's lookouts had no binoculars the night it struck the iceberg. On the fateful night of April 14, 1912, there was no moon. The ocean was unusually calm, and freezing air created a mirage-like haze that concealed the iceberg. Without binoculars, the lookouts spotted it too late, just 9 minutes before impact. Titanic was equipped with the most advanced wireless radio system of its time, with a range of 650 kilometers, far greater than most ships. In theory, ice warnings could have saved it. In practice, radio operators, underpaid and overworked, prioritized wealthy passengers' personal messages over safety signals. 6 separate iceberg warnings were received, including one from the nearby SS Californian, which had stopped for the night because of heavy ice. When Californian's operator tried to send another warning, Titanic's radio operator, swamped with passenger traffic, rudely replied, "Shut up, shut up. I am busy with Cape Race offended." The Californian switched off its radio. When Titanic struck the iceberg hours later, Californian, its closest possible rescuer, never received the distress calls. Titanic was steaming at 41 kilometers per hour, just below its maximum speed, when disaster struck. Though often criticized, this speed was not unusual for the era. At 11:30 p.m., lookouts spotted a faint glimmer. At 11:37, the order came. "Iceberg right ahead." First Officer Murdoch attempted to steer around it and reverse the engines, but the ship needed 800 meters to stop. The iceberg was only 274 meters away. The turn came too late. Titanic scraped along the iceberg, its weak iron rivets popping apart. Had Titanic hit the iceberg head-on, it might have survived, as the bow was reinforced. Instead, 5 compartments flooded at once. The ship could have stayed afloat with 4, but 5 was fatal. Water rushed in at 7 tons per second. The chaos that followed, the band playing, passengers leaping into -2 degrees Celsius waters, lifeboats launched half-empty, families separated, has been immortalized by film. But the underlying truth remains. Titanic didn't sink just because of an iceberg. It sank because of design flaws, material weaknesses, lack of lifeboats, communication failures, human errors, and greed. In only 2.5 hours, the unsinkable Titanic was gone. The nearest ship, Carpathia, arrived too late, saving only those who made it to lifeboats. About 1,500 people perished. Today, Titanic looks tiny compared to modern giants like the 458-meter Seawise Giant or Symphony of the Seas. The 3 times longer, 5 times heavier, and carrying 3.5 times more passengers. And yet, no other ship, no matter how large, has captured global imagination the way Titanic has. Between the extraordinary sequence of errors and the film that enshrined it in culture, it seems unlikely that any vessel will ever replace Titanic in our collective memory. Please subscribe to support.